Emma Chen was 18 months old on March 23, 2018, when she boarded United Airlines Flight 447 from Los Angeles International Airport to Tokyo Narita, nestled comfortably in her mother's arms with her favorite stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. At that age, Emma was what child development experts would call an easy baby. She had slept through the night since she was 6 months old, rarely fussed during car rides, and had adapted well to the disruptions of travel that came with having parents who frequently flew between the United States and Japan for business. David and Lily Chun had been making this trans-Pacific journey regularly for 3 years, ever since David's promotion to regional director of his technology company's Asian operations. Lily, who worked as a translator and cultural consultant, often accompanied David on his business trips, and they had become experienced at managing international travel with a young child. Emma had taken her first international flight when she was just 4 months old, and by 18 months, she was a seasoned traveler who seemed to enjoy the excitement of airports and airplanes. The family had been visiting Lily's parents in Los Angeles for 2 weeks, and the March 23rd flight was their return journey to Tokyo, where they had been living for the past year and a half. Emma had been in excellent health during their California visit, sleeping well, eating normally, and playing happily with her grandparents. There had been no signs of illness, teething discomfort, or the kind of developmental changes that sometimes made young children more irritable or difficult to manage. The morning of their departure had proceeded normally. Emma had awakened at her usual time, eaten a full breakfast, and seemed excited about returning to Tokyo and her familiar routines there. During the drive to LAX, she had napped peacefully in her car seat, and she had been alert and curious during the check-in and security processes at the airport, waving at other passengers and babbling contentedly in the mixture of English, Mandarin, and Japanese that characterized her early language development. Flight 447 was a Boeing 777-300ER, one of United's newest aircraft on the Los Angeles-Tokyo route, with a capacity of 364 passengers. The Chun family had been assigned seats in the economy section, with Emma traveling as a lap infant since she was under 2 years old. The flight was nearly full, carrying 347 passengers and a crew of 14, making it one of the busier international departures from LAX that day. David and Lily had chosen seats near the middle of the aircraft, away from the engines but close to restrooms and the galley area, where flight attendants could help if they needed anything for Emma during the long flight. They had traveled this route enough times to know which seats provided the best balance of convenience and comfort for international travel with a young child. Emma seemed perfectly content during the boarding process, looking around curiously at the other passengers and smiling at flight attendants who stopped to comment on how well-behaved she was for such a young traveler. She accepted her pacifier and settled into Lily's lap as the aircraft was prepared for departure, showing none of the restlessness or anxiety that sometimes affected children during the pre-flight preparations. Captain Robert Martinez, a veteran pilot with 23 years of experience flying international routes for United Airlines, completed his pre-flight checklist and received clearance for departure at 11:47 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The weather conditions were excellent, with clear skies and light winds that promised a smooth takeoff and initial climb. Flight 447 was scheduled to arrive in Tokyo at 3:15 p.m. local time the following day, after an 11-hour flight that would take them over the Pacific Ocean. The takeoff proceeded normally through the initial acceleration and rotation, with the aircraft lifting off from runway 24R at exactly 12:03 p.m. Emma remained calm and quiet during the takeoff roll and the first few minutes of climb, sucking contentedly on her pacifier and looking out the window at the rapidly shrinking landscape below. Lily and David exchanged relieved glances, grateful that their daughter was handling the departure so well, since the takeoff and landing phases of flight were often when young children became most upset or uncomfortable. But at approximately 12:11 p.m., when Flight 447 reached an altitude of about 8,000 feet and was climbing to the standard departure route over the Pacific Ocean, Emma's behavior changed dramatically and inexplicably. She suddenly began crying with an intensity and persistence that was completely out of character for her normal temperament and travel experience. The crying was not the typical fussing or whimpering that most parents learn to interpret and address with feeding, diaper changes, or comfort measures. Instead, Emma was producing ear-piercing wails that seemed to express genuine distress and fear, despite the fact that nothing in their immediate environment had changed to explain her sudden upset. Lily tried all the standard techniques that had worked to calm Emma during previous flights, offering her a bottle, checking her diaper, providing different toys and distractions, walking up and down the aisle, and attempting to rock her back to sleep. But Emma's cries only intensified, becoming so loud and persistent that passengers throughout the economy section began turning in their seats to look at the source of the disturbance. "She's never done anything like this before," Lily whispered to David, her voice filled with confusion and embarrassment as she continued trying to comfort their daughter. "She's always been such a good traveler. I don't understand what's wrong with her." David took Emma from Lily and attempted his own repertoire of calming techniques. But Emma's distress seemed to increase rather than decrease. Her cries had evolved from normal infant crying to what could only be described as screaming, with a quality of panic and terror that was deeply unsettling to hear from such a young child. Flight attendant Jennifer Walsh, who had been working international flights for 8 years and had experience with upset children, approached the Chun family to offer assistance. She had dealt with countless crying babies during flights, and she had developed a collection of techniques that usually help to calm distressed infants and minimize disruption to other passengers. "Is there anything I could do to help?" Jennifer asked, leaning down to speak quietly with Lily and David. Sometimes a change in air pressure during climb can cause ear discomfort for little ones. "Would you like me to get some warm compresses or see if we have any children's pain relief medication?" If this story truly touches your heart, let's speak for you. Like this video, subscribe to be part of our journey, and share your feelings in the comments. Lily accepted Jennifer's suggestions gratefully, but the warm compresses and gentle ear massage techniques that Jennifer recommended had no effect on Emma's crying. If anything, Emma seemed to become more agitated when they tried to touch her ears, pushing away their hands and arching her back as if she was trying to escape from some source of distress that the adults couldn't perceive. By 12:25 p.m., Emma had been crying continuously for nearly 15 minutes, and her distress was beginning to affect the entire economy section of the aircraft. Other passengers were becoming visibly annoyed and uncomfortable, with some requesting to be moved to different seats, and others complaining to flight attendants about the noise level. Jennifer Walsh consulted with senior flight attendant Maria Rodriguez about options for managing the situation. Both flight attendants had extensive experience with upset children, but they agreed that Emma's level of distress was unusual and concerning, going beyond normal infant fussing to something that seemed to indicate genuine fear or panic. "I've never heard a baby cry like this on a flight," Maria told Jennifer during their quiet conference in the galley. "It's like she's terrified of something, but there's nothing happening that should be scaring her. The flight is smooth, the cabin environment is normal, and her parents say this is completely out of character for her." Captain Martinez became aware of the situation when passengers began pressing call buttons and asking flight attendants if there was something wrong with the aircraft that might be causing the infant's distress. Several passengers reported that they had never heard a baby cry with such intensity and persistence, and some were beginning to wonder if the child behavior might be indicating some kind of problem with the flight. At 12:31 p.m., Captain Martinez made the decision to contact air traffic control about the possibility of returning to Los Angeles International Airport. While infant crying was not typically considered a flight emergency, the intensity and duration of Emma's distress, combined with growing passenger concerns and the flight crew's inability to calm the child, had created a situation that was affecting the safety and comfort of everyone aboard. Los Angeles approach, United 447, Captain Martinez radioed to air traffic control. "We have an infant passenger experiencing severe distress that we've been unable to resolve. The situation is affecting passenger comfort and crew effectiveness. Requesting vectors for return to LAX." Air traffic control granted Captain Martinez's request, though the controller's tone suggested some surprise at the unusual nature of the emergency. Aircraft were occasionally diverted for medical emergencies involving adult passengers, but it was rare for infant crying to necessitate a return to the departure airport. United 447 approved for vectors back to Los Angeles. Descend and maintain 5,000 feet. Contact LAX Tower on 120.95 for approach clearance. The announcement that Flight 447 would be returned to Los Angeles due to a passenger medical situation generated mixed reactions throughout the aircraft. Some passengers expressed frustration about the flight delay and the disruption to their travel plans. Others showed sympathy for the Chen family and support for the captain's decision to prioritize passenger comfort and safety. But Emma's reaction to the announcement was immediate and dramatic. As soon as Captain Martinez began to descend back toward Los Angeles, Emma's cry began to subside for the first time since it had started nearly 30 minutes earlier. By the time the aircraft leveled off at 5,000 feet and was established on approach to LAX, Emma had stopped crying completely and was resting quietly in her mother's arms. "I don't understand what just happened," Lily said to David as they watched Emma settle into calm alertness. "It's like she knew we were going back to the ground, and that made her feel safe again." Flight 447 landed at LAX at 12:58 p.m., less than an hour after the original departure. The aircraft was met by airport medical personnel and customer service representatives who had been alerted to the infant medical emergency. Emma appeared completely normal by the time paramedics boarded the aircraft to evaluate her condition, showing no signs of illness, injury, or distress. The paramedics conducted a brief examination of Emma and found her to be in excellent health with normal vital signs and no apparent medical problems. They concluded that whatever had caused her distress during the flight had resolved completely by the time of landing. Captain Martinez faced a decision about whether to continue the flight to Tokyo after addressing the passenger situation. Standard procedure would be to allow the aircraft to be refueled and continue the journey once the infant medical emergency had been resolved. However, Captain Martinez decided to conduct additional safety checks before departing again, partly because of the unusual nature of the emergency and partly because of his own concern about whether there might have been some environmental factor aboard the aircraft that had contributed to Emma's distress. What Captain Martinez discovered during those routine safety checks would transform Emma's crying from an embarrassing travel incident into one of the most significant aviation safety discoveries in modern commercial flight history. The additional safety inspection revealed a critical malfunction in the aircraft's oxygen generation system that had not been detected by any of the standard pre-flight checks or automated monitoring systems. The malfunction was in a backup oxygen system that would only become active if the aircraft experienced a loss of cabin pressurization at high altitude over the ocean, where emergency descent to breathable altitudes would not be possible. The oxygen system failure meant that if Flight 447 had continued to Tokyo and experienced any kind of pressurization emergency during the long flight over the Pacific Ocean, the backup life support systems would not have functioned properly. All 361 people aboard the aircraft would have died from hypoxia, oxygen starvation, during any emergency that required the use of supplemental oxygen systems. Aircraft maintenance supervisor James Patterson, who discovered the oxygen system malfunction during the post-incident inspection, had 26 years of experience in commercial aviation maintenance. He told investigators that the type of failure they found was virtually undetectable during standard pre-flight checks and would only become apparent during the kind of detailed inspection that was triggered by the flight's return to LAX. This is a type of catastrophic system failure that we train for and prepare for, but hope never to encounter, Patterson explained to the investigative team. The oxygen generation system appeared to be functioning normally according to all cockpit indicators and automated monitoring systems. It was only when we conducted a full manual inspection of the backup systems that we discovered the malfunction. The Federal Aviation Administration immediately grounded all Boeing 777-300ER aircraft in United's fleet pending inspection of their oxygen generation systems. Within 48 hours, similar malfunctions were discovered in 17 other aircraft, all of which had been flying regular passenger routes over oceans where oxygen system failures could have been fatal for everyone aboard. The FAA investigation revealed that the oxygen system malfunctions were caused by a manufacturing defect in a component that had been installed in Boeing's 777 aircraft built during a specific time period between 2016 and 2018. The defect caused gradual deterioration in the oxygen generation capability that was not detectable through standard testing procedures, but that would result in complete system failure if the backup oxygen was needed during an emergency. Boeing issued a worldwide recall of the affected component, requiring immediate inspection and replacement in hundreds of aircraft operated by airlines around the world. The recall affected 847 aircraft globally and required modifications to pre-flight testing procedures to prevent similar undetected failures in the future. Aviation safety experts estimated that Emma's crying had potentially saved thousands of lives by triggering the discovery of a defect that could have caused multiple catastrophic accidents over the following months or years if it had remained undetected. Dr. Patricia Reynolds, an aviation safety specialist with the National Transportation Safety Board, described Emma's inadvertent role in the safety discovery as unprecedented in commercial aviation history. We've never had a case where an infant's behavior during flight directly led to the discovery of a life-threatening aircraft malfunction, Dr. Reynolds said during the official investigation report release. If Flight 447 had continued to Tokyo as planned, the oxygen system failure would never have been detected until it caused a catastrophic accident. This child's distress saved not only the lives of everyone on her flight, but potentially thousands of other passengers and crew members who were flying aircraft with similar defects. The question that haunted investigators, aviation experts, and the Chen family was how an 18-month-old child could sense a mechanical malfunction that sophisticated aircraft systems and experienced flight crews had failed to detect. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a pediatric neurologist who specializes in infant sensory development, was consulted during the investigation to provide insight into whether young children might possess sensory capabilities that could detect environmental hazards that adults miss. Infants and very young children have neurological systems that are still developing and may be more sensitive to certain types of environmental changes than adult brains, Dr. Martinez explained. It's possible that Emma detected some subtle change in air quality, atmospheric pressure, or even electromagnetic fields associated with the oxygen system malfunction that registered as danger in her developing nervous system. Dr. Martinez noted that there have been documented cases of children and animals displaying unusual behavior before natural disasters, suggesting that some individuals might possess sensory capabilities that allow them to detect environmental changes that predict dangerous events. Young children's brains are incredibly plastic and adaptable, Dr. Martinez continued. They're constantly processing sensory information in ways that adult brains have learned to filter out. It's conceivable that Emma's nervous system detected some aspect of the aircraft's environment that indicated danger, even though her conscious mind couldn't articulate what was wrong. The Chen family struggled to understand their daughter's role in the aviation safety discovery. David and Lily had always known that Emma was an observant and sensitive child, but they had never imagined that her behavior could indicate awareness of mechanical problems that trained professionals couldn't detect. We still don't understand how Emma knew something was wrong with the airplane, Lily said during an interview 6 months after the incident. She's always been intuitive about people and situations, but this was something beyond anything we had ever observed. It's like she could sense danger that none of the adults recognized. Emma's story attracted international media attention and scientific interest from researchers studying infant perception, intuition, and the ways that young children might process environmental information differently than adults. Several universities initiated research projects to investigate whether infants might serve as early warning systems for certain types of environmental hazards. Dr. Michael Thompson, a researcher at Stanford University who studies infant cognition and sensory development, began a longitudinal study of children who had displayed unusual behavior responses to environmental situations. Emma's case became a reference point for understanding how young children's sensory systems might detect subtle changes in their environment that could indicate potential dangers. Emma's case suggests that we may have underestimated the sensory capabilities of very young children, Dr. Thompson said during a conference presentation about his research. If infants can detect mechanical malfunctions or environmental hazards that adult senses miss, there may be important implications for safety systems and emergency preparedness that we haven't previously considered. The aviation industry incorporated lessons from Emma's case into pilot training programs and flight crew procedures. Airlines began including information about unusual passenger behavior, including infant distress, as potential indicators of aircraft problems that might not be detected through standard monitoring systems. United Airlines recognized the Chen family's inadvertent contribution to aviation safety by providing them with lifetime flight benefits and establishing a scholarship fund in Emma's name to support research into infant development and sensory perception. The airline also implemented new protocols for investigating unusual passenger behavior that might indicate undetected safety issues. Captain Martinez, who had made the decision to return to LAX based on Emma's distress, received commendations from both United Airlines and the FAA for his judgment in prioritizing passenger safety over schedule adherence. His decision to conduct additional safety checks after the emergency landing had directly led to the discovery of the oxygen system malfunction. Captain Martinez's decision-making in this situation exemplifies the kind of safety-first thinking that makes commercial aviation as safe as it is, said FAA Administrator Jennifer Walsh during the award ceremony. His willingness to take an infant's distress seriously and to investigate potential safety concerns thoroughly prevented what could have been one of the worst disasters in aviation history. 2 years after the incident, Emma had grown into a curious and active 3-year-old who showed no memory of her flight experience, but continued to display the kind of environmental sensitivity that had characterized her behavior on Flight 447. David and Lily reported that Emma often seemed to sense changes in weather, emotional tension among adults, and other subtle environmental shifts before they became apparent to other family members. Emma has always been very attuned to her surroundings. David said during a follow-up interview, "She notices things that adults miss, and often reacts to situations before we understand what she's responding to. We've learned to pay attention when she seems upset or anxious about something, because her instincts are usually accurate." The Chen family had become advocates for research into infant sensory development and the potential for young children to contribute to safety and emergency preparedness systems. They participated in several research studies and spoke at conferences about their experience and the importance of taking children's behavioral responses seriously. Emma's case had also influenced child development practices and parenting approaches. Pediatricians and child development experts began encouraging parents to observe and document unusual behavior in their children that might indicate environmental sensitivities or perceptual capabilities that could be important for safety and well-being. Dr. Martinez, who had continued studying Emma's case and similar incidents, published research showing that infants and young children displayed measurable physiological responses to environmental changes that adults couldn't consciously detect. Her work suggested that children's nervous systems might serve as early warning systems for certain types of environmental hazards if parents and caregivers learn to interpret their behavioral signals appropriately. Children like Emma may represent an underutilized resource for environmental monitoring and safety systems. Dr. Martinez wrote in her research conclusions, "If we can learn, understand, and interpret the ways that young children respond to environmental changes, we might be able to prevent accidents and disasters that current technology and adult perception cannot anticipate." If you made it all the way here, it means this story truly held you. So don't leave without showing some love. Hit like, subscribe to stay with us, and drop a comment. I'll be here, reading every word you share. 5 years after Flight 447, Emma had started kindergarten and was thriving academically and socially. She had developed into a confident, articulate child who showed strong interest in science and helping others. Her teachers reported that she was unusually empathetic and perceptive about social dynamics and environmental changes in the classroom. The aviation safety improvements that had resulted from Emma's case have been implemented worldwide, affecting thousands of aircraft and potentially preventing multiple catastrophic accidents. The oxygen system recall and modified inspection procedures have become standard practice throughout the commercial aviation industry. Boeing had incorporated lessons from a Flight 447 incident into their aircraft design and testing procedures, developing more sensitive monitoring systems for critical life support equipment, and implementing additional backup safety measures for long-range flights over oceans. The Chen family continued to fly regularly for business and vacation travel, and Emma had become a confident and experienced traveler who enjoyed airports and airplanes. She had no conscious memory of her role in preventing the aviation disaster, but she continued to display the same environmental sensitivity that had saved 200 lives on that March day in 2018. David and Lily often reflected on the profound impact that their daughter's seemingly inexplicable behavior had produced on global aviation safety. What had begun as an embarrassing and frustrating travel incident had evolved into a life-saving discovery that had protected countless families from experiencing the kind of tragedy that could have resulted from undetected aircraft malfunctions. We used to think Emma's crying on that flight was just a bad day for our family, Lily said during a speech at an aviation safety conference. Now we understand that she was trying to protect not just us, but everyone on the plane and thousands of other people who had been at risk if that defect hadn't been discovered. Emma's story had become part of aviation safety education and training programs, used to illustrate the importance of investigating unusual circumstances and taking seriously any behavior that might indicate undetected safety risks. Her case had demonstrated that safety discoveries had come from unexpected sources and that effective safety systems required openness to information from all passengers, including the youngest and most vulnerable travelers. The baby who had saved 200 people from disaster had grown into a child who understood that her early contribution to aviation safety was part of a larger responsibility to help protect others and contribute to community well-being. Emma's parents had taught her about her inadvertent role in preventing the aviation accident, and she had developed a sense of pride and responsibility about using her perceptual abilities to help others. Emma knows that she helped keep people safe when she was little, David explained, and she's learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is speak up when something doesn't feel right, even if you can't explain why. Her experience taught our whole family to trust our instincts and to take children's concerns seriously. As Emma continued to grow and develop, researchers continued to study her case and others like it, seeking to understand how children's sensory systems might contribute to safety and environmental monitoring systems. Her story had opened new areas of research into infant perception, environmental sensitivity, and the potential for integrating children's behavior responses into safety protocols. The aviation industry had embraced the lessons from Emma's case, implementing training programs that taught flight crews to investigate unusual passenger behavior as a potential indicator of undetected safety issues. Airlines had also developed protocols for communicating with very young passengers and their families during flights, recognizing that children's responses to the aircraft environment might provide valuable information about flight conditions. 10 years after Flight 447, Emma had grown into a thoughtful and perceptive teenager who was interested in pursuing careers in either medicine or engineering, fields that would allow her to continue contributing to safety and well-being for others. Her early experience with aviation safety had influenced her academic interests, and her understanding of how individual actions could have far-reaching consequences for community safety. The Chen family had established a foundation that supported research into infant development and environmental perception, using the recognition that Emma's story had generated to fund scientific studies that might prevent future disasters and improve safety systems across multiple industries. Emma's case had become a landmark in aviation safety history, but significance extended beyond the commercial flight industry to influence safety protocols in other areas where environmental monitoring and hazard detection were crucial for protecting public welfare. Her story had demonstrated that effective safety systems required attention to all sources of information, including the behavioral responses of the youngest and most vulnerable members of the community. The 18-month-old baby who had sensed deadly danger that sophisticated technology and experienced professionals had missed had grown into a young woman who understood that her unusual perceptual abilities came with responsibilities to help protect others and contribute to the development of safety systems that could prevent tragedies before they occurred. Emma's story had proven that heroes could come in the smallest packages, and that the most important contributions to public safety might come from the most unexpected sources. Her case had changed aviation safety forever and had opened new front lines in understanding human perception, environmental monitoring, and the ways that individual sensitivity could contribute to community protection and disaster prevention. The baby who had saved 200 people from disaster had learned that her early contribution was just the beginning of a lifetime commitment to using her abilities in service of others, and that the most meaningful accomplishments often began with simple acts of authentic response to environmental conditions that others might miss or dismiss. Her story continued to inspire research, influence safety protocols, and demonstrate that effective protection systems required openness to information from all community members, regardless of age, and that the capacity to sense and respond to environmental dangers was a vital community resource that deserved recognition, development, and integration into systems designed to keep everyone safe.